welcome to the 50th episode of the Mailman Podcast. That's right, 50 episodes of this show. Man, that is pretty insane, honestly. And probably won't be that long until we get to 100. But it's 50 episodes today, and what am I going to do today? Well, I'm going to be taking a look at arguably one of the greatest film franchises of all time. And that is the Rocky series, the Rocky Balboa series. I'm going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary, 50th episode of the show by looking at the Rocky Balboa series. But that's later on. First of all, let's get some of the shout-outs done. First of all, Chucky's Playground, just a really great place to be. New layout by graphic designer Tiffany Valentine, just really great design, really awesome layout. We look better than ever. We are doing all types of conversations, both Chucky-wise and non-Chucky-wise. Just a really great place to be with a lot of great people. If you haven't checked us out, definitely check us out. Definitely join because we'd love to have you. We're at about 77 people right now, so which is really cool. And we definitely like to have more. So if you find that all that interesting, definitely come and join us because we'd love to have you. And another shout out to Movie Mayhem with Spanky and G. Just a really great podcast, run by two amazing people. Constantly pumping out episode after episode. The latest episode was on Reign Over Me. Really great episode. Highly enjoyed it. Cannot wait for next week. And all the weeks after that. The show is just absolutely amazing. So great job, Spanky and G. Can't wait for more. So now it's time to shoot the shuffle. At number 1, My Ideas by Run DMC from Raising Hell. This one is a decent little song. Number 2, The Dance of Eternity by Dream Theater from Metropolis, Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. And this one is a really great album. Definitely, if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. Really great. Dream Theater is just really amazing in general. A lot of their music, specifically their longer ones, really awesome, really epic. Every time I'm playing a video game, I'll usually put them on to make the gameplay even more epic than it already is. And this one's a pretty good little instrumental song as well. Number 3, Hound Dog by Elvis Presley. Awesome song. Elvis is the king of rock and roll, and he's pretty good. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Number 4, Funky Monks by Red Hot Chili Peppers from Blood Sugar Sex Magic. This one is pretty good. This entire album is pretty good as well. It was really the first RHCP album that is really pretty good, though their previous albums, Mother's Milk and Uplift Mofo Party Plan, I think that's what it's called, are pretty good as well. But this was really the first one that kind of catapulted them into the mainstream. It's pretty good. Number 5, Closing Time by Semisonic from Feeling Strangely Fine. This one is a great late 90s song, very, very enjoyable, very catchy, just really great. Number 6, Victim of Changes by Judas Priest from Sad Wings of Destiny. This one is pretty awesome as well. Judas Priest 70s stuff is interesting to listen to. But yeah. Number 7, Parents Just Don't Understand by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince from He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper. And this was sort of the beginning of Will Smith's whole rapper thing. Back in the 80s when he was a duo with DJ Jazzy Jeff, and back when he was known as the Fresh Prince. And this was before Fresh Prince of Bel-Air went on the air. This is a pretty good, and it tells a pretty good story. Number 8, Electric Avenue by Eddie Grant from Killer on the Rampage. this is a pretty good 80s new wave reggae-esque song. And, I mean, it's pretty good. I also like Power Man 5000's cover version of the song. It's really good. Number 9, Rock of Life by Rick Springfield from Rock of Life. And this one is a pretty good song as well. I wouldn't say it's one of Springfield's better songs, but it's still pretty enjoyable. And number 10, Paranoid by Black Sabbath from Paranoid. There's really not much else you can say about that. It pretty much speaks for itself. It's a legendary song in itself. So, yeah, Black Sabbath is awesome. And so now it's time to check out the Rocky series. And the way I kind of knew about the Rocky series is there's a video game out there simply called Rocky, and it's for the GameCube and the PS2. It might be for the Xbox as well. I'm not 100% sure, but I know for sure that it's on the GameCube and on the PS2. And the game basically goes through the events of Rocky 1 through Rocky 5. And it basically, you fight through a few competitors, some that were in the movie like Spadarico and Unicane, and some that were just made up for the game. You fight through about 3 or 4 of them, and then you fight the main, I wouldn't say villain, but the main adversary of Rocky in the certain films. And in the case of Rocky 1 and 2, it's Apollo Creed. In Rocky 3, it's Clubber Lang. In the 4th one, it's Ivan Drago. And the 5th one, it's a street fight with Tommy Gunn. And you basically do that. And it can be a bit repetitive at times, but it's really enjoyable. So if you ever get a chance to play it, definitely, it's definitely worth playing at least once. The controls are pretty decent. They're pretty basic, you know. But I really enjoyed the game, and that's how I remember. That's how I kind of first came to know about the Rocky series through that game. And so the first Rocky movie I saw was Rocky IV, actually, which is kind of a great way to start out. And that was a really enjoyable movie, but more on that in just a few moments. We're going to go ahead and talk about Rocky 1. And I first saw Rocky 1, I don't know when exactly I saw it. I remember seeing it when I was a kid, and I remember renting it on VHS, you know. It's pretty good, you know. And the story centers around Rocky Balboa, who obviously is played by Sylvester Stallone, and he's sort of like this small-time boxer. He's like a local boxer in Philadelphia. And he's not necessarily very good, technically, but he has a lot of heart, you know. He has a lot of passion for the sport of boxing. He also works for a loan shark, Gazzo. He's played by Joe Spinell. He was also in the first 2 Godfather movies, and he was in the original Maniac. And then there's a world championship bout, and it's supposed to be against Apollo Creed and Mackley Green, but Green ends up suffering an injury, and Apollo is looking for another opponent, and he ends up deciding to go ahead and choose Rocky because of his nickname, the Italian Stallion. You know, and also what's really important about it is that the fight is supposed to take place on New Year's Day of 1976, which is the bicentennial of the United States and stuff like that. So it's kind of very it's really kind of a marketing, you know, kind of scheme, You know, it's kind of a marketing ploy in a way, you know. But Rocky ends up training with this former fighter and a gym owner named Mickey Goldmill. He's played by Burgess Meredith, and he was in a few Twilight Zone episodes. He was in the Common Enough at Last episode. He's in another one. He's in other Twilight Zone episodes. He was also in the Twilight Zone movie, and and Mickey is kind of like the grumpy trainer. And at first, he doesn't really want to train him because Mickey, you know, he says that Rocky has more potential, but his actual fighting skills aren't that great. And he's like, you're gonna eat lightning and you're gonna crap thunder rock. You know, but so he ends up training him anyway. And Rocky is good friends with a guy named Paulie, and he lets him practice in the meat packing plant where he works. And obviously, Rocky punches on the meat. You know, I think everybody remembers that. You know, that's sort of an iconic scene from the film. And Paulie has a sister named Adrian, and she's a clerk in a local pet store. And she's really shy, kind of introverted, and Rocky he's like really very, I wouldn't say like sociable, like extremely sociable, but he's pretty friendly, pretty social, kind of talkative, and you know, tries and dates, and ends up gaining confidence in Adrian, and so New Year's Day comes, and the boxing match begins. And Apollo, he doesn't really take it very seriously, because the idea of it was that he chose a local fighter so that he would have, like, an easy victory. But he ends up getting knocked down in the first round, and this is the first time he's ever been knocked down, ever. And he really does underestimate him. And the fight ends up lasting 15 rounds. And it's really the first time where a boxer has gone the distance with Apollo Creed. And what that means is, for those that don't watch boxing or have no idea what boxing is, going the distance in boxing terms is when you go all the rounds that a boxing match is scheduled to. So, for example, if a boxing match is 15 rounds, and you fight, you know, all 15 of those rounds, then you go the distance with that guy. So that's what going the distance means. And Rocky ends up going the distance with Apollo Creed. And both of them suffer a lot of injuries. I think everybody remembers the eye injury that Rocky gets. Cut me, Mick. Cut me, Mick. You know. So Rocky ends up losing via split decision. Apollo Creed ends up winning. But Rocky doesn't really care about the result. And he's just happy to have gone the distance because no one had ever done that. So that's pretty much the movie. There's really not a lot to it. Nowadays, it's probably not really that special, maybe. You know, because there's a lot of sports movies have really done the rags to riches, you know, that kind of underdog story, you know, so many times, you know. So it's probably not, it wouldn't have been special if it were done today. But back in 1976, it was really good. And, you know, I watch it today, and I think it's pretty good, you know. You have to kind of keep in mind that it was done in 1976, you know, so it's kind of has that going for it. But overall, I think it's a pretty good movie, you know. So then we move on to Rocky 2. And in some ways, you know, it didn't really need a sequel per se, but since the first film did really well, it ended up getting a sequel anyway. And the sequel, it takes place right after the first one. And that's what I kind of like about this movie. And a lot of the other movies, in a way, all of the sequels sort of take place one after another, kind of. And I think this actually starts out with the final closing moments of the first one. But it begins with them kind of using footage, I think, from the first one. And right after that, they end up getting taken to the same hospital. And Apollo challenges Rocky to a rematch, but Rocky ends up announcing his retirement and sort of refusing to do it. Because at the end of the first one, Apollo says there ain't going to be no rematch. And Rocky says, don't want one. But obviously Apollo changes his mind. And Rocky needs surgery because he suffered a detached retina at the end of the fight. And he might have permanent blindness. And Rocky is sort of doing better than he was in the first film, because the fight garnered him a lot of mainstream attention. He got quite a few bucks for the fight. He's doing really well in terms of money and stuff like that. So he really does kind of blow all his money. Like, he gets a leather jacket and a new car, stuff like that. But it's understandable because this is the first time that Rocky has had a lot of money, So, and one of my favorite lines in the film that for some reason really makes me laugh, and Rocky is like to Adrian, because Adrian's kind of like, do we really need a car? And we got a baby on the way. And as it turns out, Rocky is actually impregnated Adrian, and Adrian's pregnant. And Rocky's like, you don't like the car? You got an automatic transmission. I don't know why. That just makes me laugh so much. But so they end up marrying, and Rocky and Adrian end up marrying. And Apollo becomes obsessed with the idea of a rematch because, he wants to prove that the match was a fluke. Even though he won, Rocky ended up going the distance with him. And he tries to do everything that he can to get Rocky to agree to a rematch. And Apollo just goes on this, campaign in which he just, criticizes Rocky, and just doing everything he can to make sure that Rocky will agree to a rematch. And Apollo is just training really hard. But Rocky ends up deciding to go because he needs money, because he ends up blowing it all. But Rocky, he doesn't really take it very seriously, and mainly because Adrian disapproves of him returning to boxing. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Apollo is very focused. So he just is doing all he can to be in the best physical shape possible. So the night of the fight, and Apollo, he wants to beat Rocky in less than 2 rounds. He wants to knock him out in about less than 2 rounds. They once again go the distance. But Apollo ends up getting knocked out. And Rocky ends up winning the championship. And that's pretty much the end of it. So that's pretty much the end of it. As far as the sequel goes, it's better than it has any right to be. I wouldn't necessarily put it at the top, at the near top of my favorite Rocky movies, but I'd say it's better than it probably should have been. So now we go on to Rocky 3, and this was the first Rocky film of the 80s. So you know it has to be good. And then this, it kind of starts off once again with the ending of Rocky 2. And 3 years pass by, and Rocky, he ends up defending his title, and he ends up getting a lot more famous. You know, he's kind of like the top boxer now. And there's a young fighter named Clubber Lang, who is played by Mr. T. And he becomes the number one contender for Rocky's heavyweight championship. And there's a unveiling of a statue by the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and that's where the famous Rocky statue is. And I think it is actually there in real life. And he's actually publicly challenged by Clubber Lang to a championship match. You know. And he ends up insulting him. Guy challenges his manager and all that. Hey woman, how'd you have to get it with a real man? You know, you should have never came back. I don't hate him, but I pity the fool. You know, I mean, it's Mr. T. It's so easy to do an impersonation of Mr. T. But anyway, Rocky ends up accepting the challenge. And Mickey ends up confessing to Rock that all of his title defenses were against handpicked opponents, against lesser opponents, because he didn't want Rocky to get any more injured than he already was, and he wanted him to keep him successful. So all of his fights have been against lesser opponents, you know, and he's never really faced anyone like Apollo Creed before. No, not Apollo Creed, Clubber Lang before. But anyway, Apollo Creed ends up being at the match. And he does kind of end up popping up out of nowhere. There's really no reason for him to be in the film. But at the Lang works out alone. Rocky ends up opening his training camp to the public, and kind of just, he feels that it's a lot of distractions for Rocky. And ends up, in a melee before the fight, Clubber Lang ends up pushing Mickey to the ground. He ends up suffering a heart attack. He's kind of on the verge of death. And the match ends up starting, and Rocky, he's kind of distracted. Oh, one more thing, before I even move on any further, forgot to mention this one. There is a scene in this movie that is really awesome. And it's between Rocky Balboa and Thunderlips. Oh yeah, Thunderlips. And he's played by Hulk Hogan. And his is just great. He's pretty awesome. You know, the ultimate male versus the ultimate meatball. And you know, it's just yeah, it's like a wrestler versus boxer kind of match. And in some ways, Hogan is kind of playing himself in a lot of ways. And this was before he really got popular. No, this was before, I think he joined the WWF or whatever. Like, it was before, I think this was like 1982, I think. Yeah, it was 1982. So this was before the whole Hulkamania craze started happening. And his scene is really good, you know. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that for a little bit. But anyway, back to the fight. Rocky ends up trying to fight Clubber Lang, and he does kind of put up a bit of a fight, but he is really distracted over Mickey, and Rocky ends up getting knocked out in the second round, and Mickey ends up dying, and Rock ends up telling Mickey that the fight ended by knockout in the second round. He just doesn't say that he lost. He just says that the fight ends in the second round. And Apollo Creed confronts Rocky. He offers to actually train Rocky. The eye of the tiger, man. The edge. He's lost the eye of the tiger. He lost the edge. There was something about you, champ, when I faced you. You had the eye of the tiger, man. The edge. The edge. Yeah. So, yeah. He ends up training with Apollo Creed. They actually go to California. And, I think it's California, I think. I'm not... Yeah, Los Angeles, California. And they end up training, really hard. So, the rematch is at Madison Square Garden. And Rocky ends up adopting the rope-a-dope strategy. And what the rope-a-dope strategy is when you intentionally take a beating from your opponent, and you taunt him and being able to knock him out. So, he exhausts his energy trying to knock him out, but Rocky is now more agile than ever before. And Rocky ends up overpowering him and regaining the championship and regains his eye of the tiger. And so that's pretty much Rocky 3, and it's a pretty good song. Honestly, the Eye of the Tiger song, I don't really like that song. I kind of think it's a bit poppy and kind of, it's just not my kind of music, I guess. I don't know. But this was when the series kind of began to take a more campy, slightly more commercial stance. For what it is, it's pretty good, but I wouldn't necessarily put it at the top of my favorite Rocky movies, but I'd say it's pretty good. And now we move on to Rocky 4. And I'll just go ahead and say it. This is my favorite of the Rocky films. It is a lot more commercial. It's a lot more campy than the previous ones, even more so than Rocky 3. But yeah. So it starts out with Ivan Drago. And Ivan Drago is like the new kind of villain of the film. And he's a Soviet Union boxer. And keep in mind that this was made around the time of the Cold War. So it's kind of a dated movie in some ways. And he takes steroids too. And Apollo wants to fight, but Rocky doesn't really want him to fight. And so Apollo Creed ends up challenging him to a fight at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. And there's like all types of stuff going on. James Brown performs Living in America. Like it's totally Las Vegas-esque, very patriotic and stuff. But Apollo can't really nail Ivan Drago. He's kind of indestructible. Whatever he hits, he destroys. And he ends up killing Apollo. And honestly, in some ways, I'm surprised that Drago wasn't arrested for murder. Like, you'd think that would be, like, the first thing they would do. But, yeah. And, like, Drago's like, if he dies, he dies. Like, he kind of speaks like a robot for most of the film. I mean, it's understandable because it really does fit him. And Rocky, and by the way, I want to mention this for just a little bit. Rocky ends up buying Paulie a robot. An artificial intelligence robot. Like, wow. And then it gets even kind of a bit more creepier. Because Paulie programs it to have a woman's voice and personality. and it kind of gets a lot creepier. Like, you kind of think that Polly and the robot are kind of getting together. I mean, it's just kind of weird, but Rocky ends up vacating the title, and he has to agree to fight Drago in Russia on Christmas Day because they refuse to fight in America. They say that they're afraid for Drago's life. They say that they fight in Russia or they fight nowhere. So, and what I like about this film is how kind of opposite Drago and Rocky are. Rocky is very old school when it comes to his training. Like, he's throwing logs, chops down trees. It's very old school, especially when they're in Russia, And Drago, on the other hand, is very high tech. It's like state of the art kind of stuff. They're monitoring their heart rate. It's very futuristic. And so Drago and Rocky end up fighting, and they end up having a pretty good match, And Drago is like, he's not a human. He's like a piece of iron. And so yeah, they end up going the distance once again. And Rocky ends up knocking him out. And by the way, before I even go any further, the soundtrack to this is amazing. This is the only Rocky film in which Vince DiCola is the composer for this. His music is really good. It is very 80s-esque, but the score is really good. The soundtrack is phenomenal. I mean, No Easy Way Out, Enough Said, Hearts on Fire, awesome. Burning Heart, the Kenny Loggins song, I don't know what that's called, but the soundtrack is probably one of the best soundtracks for any movie ever. So anyway, Rocky wins, and he ends up giving a victory speech, which, and this is the moment where it becomes very kind of dated, because at the time the film was made, the Cold War was going on. So America and Russia, the Soviet Union, they didn't really like each other. We didn't really like each other that much. So it's a very 80s movie. It is kind of dated, but and this speech only dates the film even more, kind of. It's like, if I can change, you can change, everybody can change. And that's the way it is. And the fight takes place on Christmas Day, which is really cool. But that's pretty much the movie. And while it is a very commercial movie, it's a popcorn movie. That's what it is. It is a popcorn movie. It's a very popcorn kind of movie. It's a summer flick, It's really for fun, It's a very fun movie to watch. It's my favorite of the Rocky series. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Just really pretty good, It can be goofy at times. It can be really goofy. It can be really corny at times. But with that said, it's a very enjoyable movie. So I highly recommend this one, because it's really good. So then about 5 years or so passes, and we end up getting Rocky V. And this one, God, this is kind of going to be boring to talk about, because the movie itself is really boring. The idea of the film is that it's supposed to take place right after Rocky IV, even though the son, when the son was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 in the fourth one. Now the fifth one, he's a teenager. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But, whatever. Continuity problems, whatever. So he ended up returning, and Union Kane is now the world champion since Rocky vacated the title. And Paulie ends up screwing the family out of the money. Like, it's some sort of scam or something. So, and Rocky ends up having to retire from boxing because he sustained permanent brain damage as a result of Drago's punches. So they end up moving back to Philadelphia, and they try and make it a little bit like a nostalgia trip for their first movie. That kind of stuff. And it's directed by the same guy who directed the first one. So it seems like they were really trying to have Rocky go full circle in here. And I think Adrian ends up going back to work at the pet shop. Paulie goes back to the meat packing plant, stuff like that. And the entire movie is pretty boring, There's not a lot of stuff that happens in there. It's kind of easygoing, but it's not a Rocky movie. And then, literally off the street, Tommy Gunn appears. And Tommy Gunn is really very trashy. You know what I mean? He is pretty trashy. He literally comes off the street, meets him on the street. So Rocky ends up, paying more attention to Tommy Gunn than he does to his son. So he kind of gets angry and acting out and all that stuff. And so George Washington Duke, who is a Don King kind of look-alike parody, whatever, he ends up kind of taking Gunn under his own wing. He ends up taking Gunn from Rocky. And when Tommy Gunn becomes the villain in this one, he becomes it really fast, there's really no reason for Tommy Gunn to be the villain in here. If there was really the villain that should have been the villain, it was George Washington Duke. And Tommy Gunn, the guy that plays Tommy Gunn, who was actually a real boxer, he's okay at best, but I think that's probably because he was an actual boxer and not an actor. But, so Tommy Gunn becomes the villain, immediately becomes the villain. And Tommy Gunn ends up winning the heavyweight title from Union Kane. But the press, they're not really that psyched about it because since Union Kane apparently never really beat Rocky Balboa for the title, he was sort of a fake champion, So Tommy Gunn, they think Tommy Gunn didn't accomplish anything, And they kind of have the same stigma they have against Tommy Gunn as they do against Rocky Balboa in the third film, in which he fought lesser opponents and stuff. And so Tommy Gunn ends up trying to goad him into a match. Rocky declines, and Tommy ends up actually knocking Paulie to the ground. And then it's like, you knock him down. Why don't you try knocking me down? No, Tommy Gunn. Tommy Gunn only fights in the ring. My ring's outside. And he challenges him to a street fight right there. And this street fight is, without a doubt, the best thing in the movie. By far. By far, the best thing in the movie is the street fight between Tommy Gunn and Rocky Balboa. Because it's really the first time you really get to see a match, a fight, for lack of a better term, because the film, it kind of really doesn't build up to anything, whereas the first four films, they were building up to a big fight. So this is kind of the big fight here, but there really wasn't any sort of building up to it. And it doesn't really mean that much, because Tommy Gunn, we barely know him, and all of a sudden we're supposed to hate him. I mean, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, the street fight is still pretty good. and ends up knocking out Tommy Gunn by a bus. And Duke threatens to sue Rocky if he touches him, which doesn't really make any sense because Rocky's broke. So, come on, Bug, touch me and I'll sue. Sue me for what? And so that's pretty much the fifth movie. And as far as a Rocky movie goes, it's a very disappointing movie. It's a very boring movie. The only thing that really is worth watching is the street fight at the end. You know, that's really the only thing that is worth watching. And you can probably watch that on YouTube, you know. So I definitely don't recommend it. I would say if you really want to see the fifth one, just watch the street fight on YouTube. Just watch the street fight scene on YouTube, and you have seen the fifth one. Because that's really the only thing that is worth watching from the fifth movie. So, years and years passed. I think it's like 16 years or so. Nearly 20 years passed. And we finally get Rocky Balboa, or Rocky 6. I don't know why they call it Rocky Balboa, but whatever, you know. So the idea of it takes place in the present day, and Rocky he's officially retired, and Adrian ends up dying from cancer, and it was off screen. And he runs a local successful diner named Adrian's. And he's often in there, and he's telling stories about his past. And his relationship with his son is once again not very good. And he reunites with an older Marie. And Marie is a character from the first one. And she can actually be seen in the first one, and Rocky's like walking her home. You know, he's basically trying to set her on the straight and narrow, basically. You know, I think Rocky predicts that she might turn into a prostitute or something like that. So yeah. So now she's working at the Lucky 7 bar, which is the bar that Rocky frequented in the first couple of films. And then the champion in this one is Mason Dixon. And he's sort of a stereotypical kind of boxer. He doesn't really have that much of a personality. And he's not evil per se. He's not like an obvious villain like Ivan Drago. He's kind of like Apollo Creed in some ways. And there's a computer simulation of a fight between Rocky Balboa in his prime and Mason Dixon. And Rocky ends up winning the simulation. And it actually inspires Rocky to end up boxing again. And they decide to hold a charity exhibition in Las Vegas. Because Dixon, his popularity kind of falls off. Because he's kind of like Rocky in Rocky 3. Because he kind of goes up against lesser opponents. I think he's been the champion for so long that it doesn't really mean anything. So Rocky ends up training with Apollo's old trainer Duke, and the fight is a HBO pay-per-view event. And the fight is really good. It's very realistic, you know. And Stallone himself still looks awesome for his age, you know. He looks really good for being like 60-something. So he's in great shape. And the fight is just really good, you know. I think any boxing fan, or just fans of the Rocky series in general, would really enjoy it. And once again, Rocky ends up going the distance with a much younger opponent than him. And that's really what he wanted to do anyway. Well, much like in the first film, he just wants to go the distance with the champion. Because, you know, Rocky's kind of seen as an old kind of dinosaur, you know. He kind of has that problem going on there. And it's like, it ain't over till it's over. What's that from, the 80s? More like the 70s. But, yeah. So Rocky ends up going the distance with Mason Dixon. He ends up winning the respect of Mason Dixon. And the result is Rocky loses via split decision. Mason Dixon wins. It's kind of like the ending of Rocky 1. It kind of goes back to that ending. So that's pretty much the movie. It's a really good return to form. It's a hell of a lot better than Rocky 5, let me tell you that. It's a hell of a lot better than Rocky 5. It's definitely really up there. I wouldn't say it's better than the first one, but it's definitely up there. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Overall, the Rocky series is very good. It's a very solid series. Some aren't really as good as others, but all five are all six are consistent a little bit. Some of them can be goofy at times, but it's still a really good series. Stallone's great in them as both writer, director, actor. All that type of stuff. So if you haven't seen the series, definitely check it out because these series are very, very, very good. So definitely check them out. So that's all for the 50th episode of the Mailman Podcast. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.